Paris, April 17, 1986. At Charles de Gaulle Airport, Colonel Hassan Karim boards an Air France flight to Tripoli. First class, as always. He orders champagne before takeoff. 12 passengers sit around him. 3 are Libyan intelligence. 1 is cabin crew. What Karim doesn't know is that this flight was chosen days earlier, after a GCHQ intercept flagged his name and a single word, window. He believes neutral airspace protects him. He believes France protects him. But 90 minutes before landing, as news breaks of Tripoli burning, Karim's body will fail at 35,000 feet before he ever knows he was targeted. This is Operation Black Champagne. Colonel Hassan Karim was not a frontline commander. He was more dangerous than that. By the early 1980s, Karim had become a senior logistics coordinator inside the Libyan Mukhabarat, the intelligence directorate that answered directly to Muammar Gaddafi. His role was specific, managing weapons transfers, cash movements, and cutouts linking Tripoli to militant groups targeting Western interests across Europe and the Middle East. Karim's operational signature was precision through routine. He flew monthly between Paris and Tripoli, always first class, always on Air France, one of the few Western carriers still servicing Libya during its peak isolation. The route gave him access to European banking systems, facilitated meetings with arms brokers operating out of France, and maintained communication channels with cells the Mukhabarat funded across the continent. Associates described him as methodical, never impulsive. He kept schedules. He honored commitments. He blended into the business-class ecosystem of international travel so thoroughly that Western surveillance teams had flagged him as low priority for direct action. His defining skill was invisibility through normalcy. He didn't hide. He blended. Tax records showed a Parisian apartment leased under a diplomatic cover. Credit card statements revealed purchases at upscale restaurants near the 8th arrondissement. Phone intercepts captured conversations about family visits, medical appointments, routine complaints about Air France service delays. The profile suggested a bureaucrat, not a battlefield asset. But behind the routine lived the network. British intelligence had tracked Karim for 18 months before April 1986. GCHQ intercepts confirmed his role, coordinating material support channels connected to the provisional IRA, specifically shipments of Semtex explosive and detonators moving through Mediterranean ports. French intelligence shared logistics data showing cash transfers Karim facilitated totaling over $4 million between January 1985 and March 1986. The money moved through shell companies in Monaco, Cyprus, and Malta. The recipients included groups operating in Lebanon, Northern Ireland, and West Germany. Intelligence services had monitored him for over a year. By March 1986, British analysts concluded Karim represented a strategic coordination node, someone whose removal would disrupt multiple operational pipelines simultaneously. Direct capture was impossible. Libya had no extradition treaty with Western nations. Overt retaliation risked creating a diplomatic crisis that would expose intelligence sources and methods. The authorization to act came in early April, following an event that changed the calculation entirely. On April 5, 1986, Libyan-backed operatives bombed the La Belle discotheque in West Berlin. 3 people died, including 2 American servicemen. Over 200 were injured. Signals intelligence intercepts confirmed direct Libyan government involvement. The attack violated an unspoken boundary, deliberate targeting of American military personnel on NATO soil. Within 72 hours, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher authorized British cooperation with American retaliatory strikes against Libya. The operation was designated El Dorado Canyon, but British intelligence saw an opportunity beyond the airstrikes. GCHQ intercepts from April 8th confirmed Karim had booked his monthly Air France flight for April 17th. 10 days after the Berlin bombing, 6 days before the planned American strikes. The timing created a window. Killing Karim on the ground risked exposure and attribution. Killing him in the air, synchronized with chaos already dominating international headlines, offered something better: a death that would align perfectly with shock, stress, and the global crisis unfolding in real time. British intelligence doctrine by 1986 had evolved toward what internal memos called the plausibility framework. The logic was straightforward: remove actors without creating martyrs or crises by ensuring their deaths appeared natural, coincidental, or self-inflicted. The method required patience, access, and timing. Karim's case satisfied all three conditions. The obstacles were significant. First, the operation would occur aboard a commercial aircraft in international airspace, a violation of aviation law and diplomatic norms that could trigger a crisis if exposed. Second, the target would be surrounded by fellow Mukhabarat officers who understood tradecraft and would scrutinize any anomaly. Third, the method had to leave zero forensic trace. Poison detectable in autopsy was unacceptable. Visible trauma was unacceptable. Any deviation from natural death would trigger investigation. Despite these challenges, planners identified a vulnerability: Karim's predictability. He flew the same route, same carrier, same class. He trusted routine. He trusted French-Libyan diplomatic ties to insulate him from hostile action. And most critically, he would be aboard an aircraft when news of Tripoli burning reached him. Stress and shock guaranteed by circumstance, not manipulation. The authorization came through MI6 channels on April 9th. The operational window was 8 days. The method would be chemical, the delivery mechanism would be human, and the synchronization would be perfect. Within 72 hours, all elements would be in position. But first, the delivery vector needed to be resolved. The operative who would execute this mission had been embedded for 18 months before Karim ever became a priority target. She was a French-British dual national, recruited through a talent spotting operation targeting individuals with hospitality industry experience, the fluency in Arabic, and family ties to North Africa that made Middle Eastern route assignments plausible. Her file showed prior work at luxury hotels in Paris and Nice. No criminal record, no intelligence connections visible to background checks. Her recruitment had been slow, careful, and entirely compartmentalized from other operations. British intelligence embedded her into Air France cabin crew hiring pipelines via Charles de Gaulle in late 1984. Her application highlighted hospitality experience and Arabic fluency, both assets Air France valued for routes serving North African destinations during a period when few carriers maintained service to Libya. She passed standard vetting. Tax records were genuine, union membership accrued, seniority built naturally. She flew exclusively Paris-Tripoli rotations during Libya's isolation period. A route assignment that appeared entirely consistent with her language skills and no other crew member's willingness to fly repeatedly into Gaddafi's Libya. Internally, she carried a compartmentalized designation, Asset L12. Her handler operated out of the British Embassy in Paris under diplomatic cover as a cultural affairs attaché. Communication occurred through dead drops in the 7th arrondissement. Messages left in hollowed-out books at a second-hand bookstore near the Musée Rodin. She never met her handler face-to-face after the initial recruitment. She never knew the full scope of operations she might eventually support. For 18 months, she simply flew the route, filed reports on passenger manifests, noted security procedures, and maintained her cover. The decision to activate her for Kareem came on April 10th. The handler left a message in the dead drop, a single page of encoded instructions hidden inside a copy of Le Monde. The activation protocol was simple. She would receive a package at her apartment within 48 hours. The package would contain a vial no larger than a contact lens case. The compound inside was designed to remain inert until combined with elevated cortisol and adrenaline levels, the precise physiological state induced by acute stress. Dosage measured in micrograms. Application method: transfer via champagne flute rim contact during first-class service. No injection. No residue detectable by standard toxicology screening available in 1986. The compound had been developed by British chemical research teams working within parameters established after intelligence services concluded that traditional poisons created too much forensic exposure. The innovation was elegance, a substance that required the target's own body to activate it. Stress hormones acted as the catalyst. Without elevated cortisol, the compound remained biochemically neutral. With it, cardiac arrhythmia would begin within 15 to 40 minutes, depending on the individual's baseline health and continued stress exposure. During the April 13th briefing, conducted via encrypted communication through the dead drop system, Asset L-12 received final confirmation. Kareem was booked on flight AF-724, departing Charles de Gaulle at 0940 hours on April 17th. She was assigned to that flight rotation. The compound would be delivered to her apartment on April 15th. Application would occur during standard champagne service in first class. Timing was critical. The American airstrikes against Tripoli were scheduled for the early hours of April 15th, Libyan time. But news coverage would dominate international broadcasts throughout the 17th. Kareem would board the aircraft. He would watch his country being bombed in real time on the newly installed personal entertainment screens Air France had recently added to first-class cabins. The stress would be organic, unavoidable, and perfectly synchronized with the compound's activation requirements. The team supporting the operation was deliberately minimal. One handler in Paris, one chemist consultant operating out of Porton Down, the British Chemical Research Facility, one signals confirmation cell monitoring live GCHQ intercepts to verify Kareem's travel and ensure no last-minute changes to his itinerary. No backups, no abort protocol once the aircraft was airborne. The smaller the team, the smaller the exposure. By April 16th, all elements were in position. Asset L-12 had the compound. Kareem's reservation was confirmed. The American strikes were 48 hours away. The window was open. April 17th, 1986. Charles de Gaulle Airport, Terminal 2C. Boarding for Flight AF-724 began at 0910 hours local time. Kareem arrived at the gate 28 minutes before departure. Consistent with his travel pattern documented over 14 previous flights on the same route. He carried a single leather briefcase and one checked bag. Security screening flagged nothing. His diplomatic passport expedited the process. He moved through the terminal with the confidence of someone who had made this journey dozens of times. Asset L-12 boarded the aircraft at 0855 hours as part of the cabin crew pre-flight preparation. She conducted standard safety checks in the first-class cabin. 6 rows, 12 seats. The manifest showed 9 passengers confirmed for first class. Kareem was assigned seat 2 Alpha, window side, second row, left side of the aircraft. The seat offered privacy, direct access to the aisle, and proximity to the galley where champagne service would be prepared. Complications emerged immediately. 2 additional Mukhabarat officers upgraded to first class at the gate. British intelligence had tracked one of them, a junior logistics officer named Bashir, but the second was unknown. The cabin now held 3 Libyan intelligence personnel within visual range of one another. Any anomaly during service would be observed by trained operatives who understood surveillance, behavioral tells, and operational security. Asset L-12 maintained protocol. She greeted passengers as they boarded. She smiled. She verified seat assignments. She offered assistance with carry-on luggage. Nothing about her demeanor suggested anything other than professional routine. Karim boarded at 09:23 hours. He nodded to the 2 Mukhabarat officers already seated in rows 3 and 4. Brief acknowledgement, no extended conversation. He placed his briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled into seat 2 Alpha. An Asset L-12 approached within 90 seconds. "Good morning, Colonel. May I offer you champagne before departure?" Standard first-class greeting. The title was visible on the passenger manifest. Nothing unusual about using it. Karim smiled. "The usual. Laurent Perrier, if you have it." She did. Air France stocked Laurent Perrier Grand Siècle for first-class Paris-Tripoli flights, one of the few premium amenities that made the route tolerable for Western businessmen and Libyan officials alike. The aircraft pushed back from the gate at 09:42 hours, 2 minutes behind schedule. Taxi to runway 27 left took 11 minutes. Takeoff occurred at 09:53 hours. The flight path would take them southeast over the Alps, across the Mediterranean, and into Libyan airspace. Either estimated flight time, 3 hours and 38 minutes. Estimated arrival in Tripoli, 13:31 hours local time. The execution window opened at 11:05 hours, when cabin crew activated the onboard entertainment system. Air France had recently installed personal television screens in first-class seats, a luxury innovation in 1986 that allowed passengers to select from multiple news channels, films, and music options. The system was new enough that most passengers still found it novel. Karim had commented on it during his previous flight, according to crew reports filed by Asset L-12 during her 18-month embedding. The compound sat in a small vial secured inside Asset L-12's uniform pocket. The application method required precision, though the substance needed to transfer from the vial to her fingertip. Then from her fingertip to the rim of the champagne flute, where Karim's lips would make contact. The transfer had to be invisible. The motion integrated seamlessly into standard service procedure. At 11:19 hours, Asset L-12 began champagne service. She prepared 3 flutes in the galley. Laurent Perrier Grand Siècle, chilled to exactly 6 degrees Celsius as per Air France standards. She carried the tray toward the first-class cabin. Her hand moved to her pocket. The vial opened without sound. The compound transferred to her right index finger. Quantity: approximately 20 micrograms, a volume smaller than a grain of salt. She approached Karim's seat. He was reading a French newspaper, Le Figaro, dated April 16th. And the headline discussed escalating tensions between the United States and Libya. He looked up as she arrived. "Your champagne, Colonel." She placed the tray on the pull-down service table. Her right hand lifted the flute designated for Karim. As she transferred it from tray to table, her index finger made contact with the rim for less than 1 second. The motion appeared identical to standard handling. The compound transferred completely. No visible residue, no scent, no taste alteration. Karim accepted the glass. "Thank you." Asset L-12 maintained eye contact for 3 seconds, longer than purely functional, shorter than intimate or suspicious. Professional courtesy. She moved to the next row to serve the other Mukhabarat officers. Karim sipped the champagne at 11:21 hours. The compound entered his system. At this stage, it remained biochemically inert. activation required stress hormones. Without elevated cortisol and adrenaline, the substance would metabolize harmlessly within 6 hours and leave no detectable trace. At 11:27 hours, CNN International began broadcasting breaking news. The first reports of explosions in Tripoli crossed the feed. Karim switched his personal entertainment screen to the news channel. The footage showed smoke rising over coastal installations. American F-111 bombers had struck multiple targets across Libya. Tripoli, Benghazi, military installations, intelligence headquarters, and locations associated with Gaddafi's command structure. Operation El Dorado Canyon had begun ahead of the publicly announced schedule. Witnesses seated in rows 3 and 4 later reported that Karim's breathing changed. His posture stiffened. He leaned forward toward the screen. His hands gripped the armrests. The physiological response was immediate and visible. Cortisol levels spiked. Adrenaline flooded his system. The compound activated. The mechanism was elegant in its simplicity. The chemical structure mimicked naturally occurring electrolytes. Once activated by stress hormones, it interfered with potassium channels in cardiac muscle cells. The result was electrical destabilization, specifically ventricular arrhythmia that mimicked stress-induced cardiac arrest. The progression was predictable. Initial irregularity, escalating rhythm disruption, loss of effective pumping function, collapse. Time from activation to cardiac failure ranged from 15 to 45 minutes, depending on the individual's cardiovascular health and the intensity of the stress response. Karim watched footage of his country burning. CNN showed aerial views of Tripoli harbor. Secondary explosions suggested fuel depots hit. The commentary mentioned civilian casualties, though numbers were unconfirmed. The Libyan government had not yet issued a statement. Gaddafi's location was unknown. At 11:38 hours, Karim's hands began trembling. Passengers in adjacent seats noticed but attributed it to emotional distress, a reasonable response to watching one's homeland under attack. He requested water at 11:42 hours. Asset L-12 delivered it within 90 seconds. His speech was normal. No slurring, no visible confusion. Only the compound affected cardiac rhythm, not neurological function. At 11:49 hours, Karim's breathing became labored. He pressed the call button. Asset L-12 responded immediately. He complained of chest tightness. She asked if he had a history of heart problems. He said no. She offered to contact the captain and request medical assistance upon landing. He nodded, but did not speak. His skin had paled noticeably. At 11:55 hours, Karim collapsed. His body slumped forward against the seatbelt. The passenger in seat 2 Bravo, a French businessman traveling to Tripoli for an oil contract negotiation, shouted for help. Asset L-12 initiated emergency response protocol. She checked for pulse, weak and irregular. She checked for breathing, shallow and rapid. She called for the senior flight attendant and requested the onboard medical kit. Air France protocols required cabin crew to attempt resuscitation. Asset L-12 began chest compressions, while another crew member prepared the portable defibrillator Air France had installed on long-haul aircraft, following new international aviation safety standards. The defibrillator delivered 2 shocks at 11:57 and 11:59 hours. Both failed to restore normal rhythm. The device's automated diagnostic system recorded ventricular fibrillation, a chaotic electrical state incompatible with effective cardiac function. The captain diverted toward the nearest airfield, Palermo, Sicily, approximately 40 minutes away at current speed. Medical emergency declared to air traffic control at 12:01 hours. The aircraft descended to a lower altitude to reduce cabin pressure stress. Asset L12 continued chest compressions for another 8 minutes. At 12:08 hours, after no pulse had been detected for 7 continuous minutes, the senior flight attendant called the time and ceased resuscitation efforts. Colonel Hassan Karim was pronounced dead at altitude. Cause: apparent cardiac arrest. No signs of poisoning. No foreign substances reported by crew. No unusual activity observed. The body remained in seat 2 Alpha, covered with a blanket. The Mukhabarat officers in rows 3 and 4 demanded to speak with the captain. They were informed that medical professionals in Palermo would conduct a preliminary examination upon landing. Asset L12 completed the incident report required by Air France safety protocols. She documented the timeline. Chest pain reported at 11:49 hours. Collapse at 11:55 hours. Resuscitation attempts from 11:56 to 12:08 hours. Death pronounced at 12:08 hours. She noted that the passenger had been watching news coverage of the Libya strikes immediately before symptoms began. She observed that emotional distress appeared acute. The report attributed the death to cardiac arrest, possibly stress-induced. The aircraft landed in Palermo at 12:41 hours. Italian medical personnel boarded and examined the body. Preliminary assessment confirmed cardiac arrest. No visible trauma. No signs of foul play. Libyan diplomatic officials in Rome were notified. The body was transferred to a morgue pending autopsy authorization. The 2 surviving Mukhabarat officers requested immediate communication with Tripoli. Italian authorities denied the request pending completion of standard death investigation protocols. The officers protested. They argued diplomatic immunity. They demanded the body be released to Libyan custody. Italian officials explained that aviation safety regulations required medical examination of any passenger death aboard an aircraft in Italian airspace. The autopsy was scheduled for April 18th. Libyan officials dispatched a medical team from Tripoli to observe. But before the autopsy could occur, Libyan authorities in Rome received instructions directly from Tripoli. Do not pursue investigation. Attribute the death to shock induced by watching the American bombing. Release the body for immediate repatriation. No autopsy was ever performed. Libyan doctors attributed Karim's death to acute myocardial infarction triggered by psychological shock. The explanation was medically plausible. Stress-induced cardiac events were well documented. The timing, collapsing while watching his country bombed, created a narrative that required no additional explanation. Investigating further would raise questions about what Karim was doing in Paris, who he met with, and what intelligence activities he coordinated. Libya had no interest in those questions becoming public. Air France filed the incident as natural causes. The airline's insurance carrier paid a settlement to Karim's family. The case file was closed within 30 days. Asset L12 completed her shift rotation and continued flying the Paris-Tripoli route for 9 more months before transferring to a different route assignment, a routine career move that raised no suspicion. The operation achieved its objectives without attribution. Karim died in international airspace aboard a civilian aircraft surrounded by witnesses who saw only a man overwhelmed by shock and stress. The method left no forensic trace. The timing synchronized perfectly with global chaos already dominating news cycles. No investigation implicated British intelligence. No diplomatic crisis emerged. The death appeared exactly as designed, natural, coincidental, and tragic. But the strategic consequences extended beyond Karim's removal. Within 72 hours of his death, British signals intelligence detected disruption across the multiple networks he had coordinated. Cash transfers stalled. Arms shipments disappeared from logistics pipelines. Cutouts went dark. The networks didn't collapse entirely. They fragmented. Operatives lost their coordinator. Processes lost their administrator. The infrastructure continued to exist, but without Karim's methodical oversight, it degraded rapidly. By late May 1986, GCHQ intercepts confirmed that Libyan intelligence was attempting to rebuild Karim's networks. But the reconstruction was chaotic. New personnel lacked his institutional knowledge. Communication channels that Karim had carefully insulated now operated with less security. Western intelligence services exploited the gaps. Surveillance expanded, or penetration operations succeeded where they had previously failed. The disruption cascaded. The operation also validated a doctrine. British intelligence planners documented Operation Black Champagne as a case study in synchronized statecraft. The lesson was specific. Kill invisibly during chaos where no one wants answers. The method could be replicated. The formula was reproducible. Target selection, chemical delivery, psychological stress induction, and timeline synchronization with external events. All elements that could be adapted to future operations. Asset L12 never knew Karim's identity beyond what appeared on the passenger manifest. She never knew the strategic significance of his networks. She never knew the intelligence product his death enabled. Her handler maintained contact for another 14 months before she was rotated out of active service and given a civilian job within the British diplomatic community in Paris. Her embedding had been successful. Her operational security had been perfect. And her activation had required less than 2 minutes of action aboard an aircraft at 35,000 feet. The immediate aftermath revealed nothing because nothing was designed to be revealed. Italian authorities filed their report. Cardiac arrest, natural causes, no suspicious circumstances. Air France submitted documentation to aviation safety regulators. Medical emergency handled per protocol. Resuscitation attempted. Passenger expired despite efforts. Libyan diplomatic channels received the body and repatriated Karim to Tripoli for burial with full military honors. The funeral occurred on April 21st. Gaddafi did not attend. Senior Mukhabarat leadership paid respects. Western intelligence services monitored the funeral via satellite imagery. No anomalies detected. By April 25th, British intelligence assessed that the operation had concluded without exposure. No investigation was launched. No questions were asked publicly. The death received minimal media coverage. A footnote buried beneath headlines about Operation El Dorado Canyon and its diplomatic fallout. Karim's name appeared in casualty lists as one of many deaths connected to the crisis. The narrative absorbed him completely. Strategic assessment within MI6 concluded that Operation Black Champagne achieved 3 objectives simultaneously. First, a removal of a logistics coordinator whose networks facilitated material support to groups targeting British interests. Second, disruption of those networks without revealing sources and methods. Third, validation of chemical delivery protocols that left zero forensic trace under autopsy conditions available in the mid-1980s. The cost was harder to quantify. Diplomatically, there was none. No one knew British intelligence had acted. Operationally, the tradecraft remained secure. Asset L12's cover held. The chemical compound remained classified. The synchronization methodology stayed compartmentalized. But the human cost existed nonetheless. Asset L12's psychological evaluation 6 months after the operation noted symptoms consistent with operational stress. She reported difficulty sleeping. She described intrusive thoughts about passengers she served on subsequent flights. She questioned whether any of them might be targets she didn't know about. The evaluation concluded she remained operationally viable, but recommended reassignment away from active embedding roles. She never flew the Paris-Tripoli route again. For Karim's family, the consequences were immediate and permanent. His wife received a widow's pension from the Libyan government. His 3 children lost their father. Intercepted communications from May 1986 revealed his wife discussing the funeral, the shock, the sudden nature of his death. She believed the bombing killed him. She believed the stress stopped his heart. She never suspected anything else. In some sense, her grief was built on a truth. Violence did kill him, but just not the violence she imagined. The moral question embedded in Operation Black Champagne defies clean resolution. From one perspective, this was precision, removing a man whose coordination enabled bombings, kidnappings, and arms transfers that killed civilians across Europe and the Middle East. Karim's network supported groups responsible for documented atrocities. His removal disrupted those operations. No collateral damage occurred. No civilians aboard the aircraft were harmed. The method avoided the chaos and exposure of a conventional strike. From another perspective, this was murder disguised as medicine, conducted in civilian space without consent or accountability. An aircraft full of passengers became an execution chamber. A commercial flight became a battlefield. A professional woman was turned into an instrument of state violence without ever fully understanding what she was doing or why. The legal framework governing armed conflict didn't apply. The oversight mechanisms governing intelligence operations were bypassed. Karim died without trial, without charges, without any public accounting of what he had done or why he was targeted. The answer reveals more about your worldview than about Karim. If you believe intelligence services must operate beyond legal constraints to prevent greater harm, Operation Black Champagne represents effective statecraft, cold, clinical, and strategically sound. If you believe state violence requires transparency and accountability even in covert operations, this represents a boundary crossed too quietly and too easily. But the operation succeeded specifically because it refused accountability. The secrecy was the strategy, the deniability was the weapon, and the synchronization with chaos ensured no one would look too closely at one dead man on one airplane during a week when entire cities burned. What's your take on this? Does a death without fingerprints make assassination strategic or simply unaccountable? If the operation saved lives by disrupting networks that would have killed again, does the method matter? Or does conducting state violence in civilian airspace cross a line that strategic necessity can't justify? Drop your perspective in the comments. And if this story made you reconsider what intelligence services do in the spaces we never see, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to understand that the Cold War wasn't fought only on battlefields. It was fought in champagne flutes at 35,000 feet.